want to thank everyone for coming to join us today. As Allison mentioned, what we'll be discussing is what we see as the future of search within the enterprise content management system. And the way that we like to think of it is that search should be more about applications built around the concept of finding. And by that, we'll go over these quick 3 ideas. We did a survey recently that asked people how they work with content. And we wanted to know what it is that they use to find content and how they work with the content once they find it, if they're so lucky. And what do they do when they don't? Then we'll look at the concept of how we move from searching to finding. So we really want to focus on that idea of the end goal and not just the activity. And then we'll open it up, as Allison said, for some quick question and answer. So without further ado, let's dive in. We'll start with something that we all know. Time is money. We know that. Whether in the ability to actually get a new product offering to consumers or via quick response time to customer-based questions, the longer we take to respond to our consumers' needs, the more potential income we lose. However, when it comes to giving our employees and our consumers those tools they need to be the most efficient, we seem to be falling down and lacking. Within our companies and our applications, we often have information that we know we created it. It already exists. And that we know it would be beneficial to our time-saving goals. And yet, when it comes to locating that information, we often end up taking more time searching for what we need. It's when we get lucky that we actually find what we're looking for. And so, in 2018, we took some time to talk to some business users. We talked to 1,000 business users about how they worked with content. And while the focus was on searching within a business context, we know that the ways and means of discovery for content are pretty similar, whether you're acting in a place of business or as a general consumer. In fact, I would suggest that many people, when they are at work, they are being led by their consumer search experiences. They are oftentimes taking those applications that they have been using in their regular life, so to speak, and bringing those behaviors into the business world. We wanted to understand within our survey not only how people went about locating that content that they need, we also wanted to try and understand the outcome too. When you were searching, did you find what you need? If not, what did you do? Because we know that not every search results in a find, and that costs us time. And as we stated before, time is money. So before we get into some of the information that we found out in the survey, let's take a look at who our survey people were. So we conducted an online survey, and we tried to have a wide variety of location for our survey participants. As you can see here, the majority were located in the US. However, we did also get respondents from Great Britain. Not only did we try to vary our location, we also wanted to take a look at different age groups. I think it's also important to point out that while I don't have a slide here, we're pretty evenly split on our gender allocation as well. So we really wanted to make sure that statistically, we were pretty sound. And as you can see here within our respondents' age groups, we were pretty evenly split across various demographics. So what did we find? Well, actually, we found out quite a bit. And honestly, we could spend a full hour on the results alone of the survey. It's really quite intriguing. But let's take a look at some of the relevant information for today's ECM search topic. When it comes to searching and locating content, we found that people really prefer to search. And I know that's not exactly earth-shattering information, but I think it's really important here to point out the where. People really are using so many different types of search, and they are comfortable not only in the digital, but in the analog as well. And so we see that we have a fair distribution across the search bar using something similar to a quick search, actually asking somebody. So just as many people who are using the search bar are also taking that same time to go across and actually talk to somebody who might have the information they're looking for. And then they also use search within email or Slack or other collaborative tools, as well as looking across multiple systems. And then they also use the tried and true browse methodology. Not a problem. So next what we did is we looked at our distribution across the ages. And what we did find was quite interesting as well, is that it does make a difference. Those who grew up with search, our younger participants, actually are so much more comfortable using something similar to the search bar. That is where they go to. They grew up within the browser. They are used to going to Amazon, to other websites, and actually just typing something into a bar and getting results. Those of us that are in the older age bracket, and I count myself within one of those, we oftentimes prefer a more informal or a more personal mechanism for actually locating the content and the information. So we might look to the person in the cubicle next to us or browse through our email and other collaborative tools. And so let's really quickly look at some of the takeaways. First, there isn't a universally preferred way to locate content. Life would be pretty boring if everybody was the same. And here we see it's no different. Despite what our IT departments and our other technological institutions would hope for, there really is no one way. And two, content is strewn all over the place in different systems. Remember, people are used to looking not only in their content management systems, but also in email and other places. And so we need to find a better way to find content, a way that empowers all of these different types of searching. And it goes for our employees and our consumers. It's quite a challenge, really, if you think about it. And before we go on into some examples, let's take a really quick look at some of the survey findings that we have in regards to what do people do when they are looking for their content. And more importantly, what do they do when they know the content exists, but they just can't find it? Okay, so we've been through our search. So as we've said, regardless of the method of searching, a lot of people aren't finding what they're looking for. And as a result, almost 3/4, 72% of our respondents said that they recreate the content, even though they know it exists, because they simply can't find. And of that, 72% say that they ask somebody else to recreate it. So it's not just that they're doing the recreation, but they may go to somebody else to recreate the content that already exists. So it's a double whammy. Imagine you're a claims adjuster, somebody who's working through a claim. And I can imagine your client won't be too happy to keep sending you over and over again the same files. That goes the same for any financial consumer who's trying to work through, say, the onerous task of applying for a loan or a home mortgage. Having to redo the same process over and over again is not exactly fulfilling your experience promise to your consumer. Just think of the cost implications of that. Not only the time spent searching and not finding, but then also the cost of recreating some things that already exist. It's not really an effective way to do things. And so, as we've stated, time is money. And these are expensive problems, not just in hard costs, but in the opportunity costs as well. And first, while we say here they're for big companies, the idea goes across no matter what size of the organization you have. We often spend more time in hard costs looking for and tracking down that information. So again, if we don't find what we're looking for in the initial parts of our search, we continue to go at it and at it and at it because we know that we should be able to find it. And so we're wasting time looking for information. Secondly, in this day and age, when we have regulations around the data as it exists and who owns that data and what we should be able to do with that data, consider GDPR and the regulations that go around that. It's getting harder and harder to get away with the idea of not being able to locate not just content, but the data that is owned by the user. Within GDPR, we need to be able to express to the consumer what data we have about them. And if we can't locate that data, we're going to be in deep trouble. Secondly, let's go beyond those hard costs and look at some of the opportunity costs that go along with it. If we cannot fulfill the customer experience promise that we have made to create something that delights the consumer and makes their life easier, then we are going to lose those customers through churn. And likely that is going to be as a direct result of not being able to meet their expectations. So we really have lost both in time and money because we cannot locate content. And so, what are we going to do about it, or what can we do about it? It's not all doom and gloom. I want to stress that there are ways to fulfill these promises and to get more to finding versus just searching. And that's really what today is all about. So for us, we think that there are some changes and some ways to approach applications that really can make things easier for the consumer and also for the business as well. And so to start, we think that we should present tools that need to work the way that people work. Not everyone thinks in the same path or hierarchically. While people do work within path-driven ideas, they don't always follow the same path. So think about how you might locate content in Amazon. If I want to find a tablet that's on sale, I may go to the sales area first and then go to tablets, or I may go through computers, tablets, mobile devices to find the item that I'm looking for. So while I do have the idea of hierarchy, my hierarchy might be different than somebody else's. And so when we have a straight hierarchical system, we oftentimes lose people and the way that they think. Likewise, relationships matter. So this idea goes along the more of a concept of ambient findability. So usually we have the concept of stumbling upon content. And there are ways to make this more informational and to present content before the user is even thinking about needing it. So by creating either automatic or inferred relationships, we have a great way to access content you need when you need it. Next, our tools should make things easy to do. This seems like a simple thing, but we all know that doing easy is actually quite hard, especially when we're trying to address so many different needs and people all trying to do different work. As such, we should stay agile. So when we're working on our consumer-facing apps, we need to design around those consumers and what they need to do, not how you necessarily do business. Consumers don't care how you organize your work. Conversely, when working on internally facing apps, there may be many different ways to organize the content. Think of your users before designing your app or system. In either case, take baby steps, be agile, and as possible, put things out and move quickly to respond to their feedback and to their needs. And ultimately, what this boils down to is the ability to listen to your users and to empathize with what they're trying to do. Listen to them at all stages. Don't figure out what application you want to build. Try and address the problem that your users are trying to solve. So that's all well and good, but how do we move on to that finding and not that searching? Let's take a look at 3 key areas where we can design apps that users want to use and can actually do more finding. First, let's start with the idea of a powerful search. We know that people like to search. Obviously, that came back very strongly within our survey results. So let's let them. But let's make the results and the next steps more relevant and to have more meaning for the users. Also, consider the idea of contextual browse. Give me what I need to know now to do the work or to do the next step. Give it to me as I need to consume it. And lastly, the idea exists of a single source of truth. If information is in other systems, and that information will help you do what you need to do, then access that information via integrations. Give your users someplace they want to be. And so we're going to start off first and foremost looking at the idea of this powerful search. And in some of the screenshots and the examples that I show here, we have more of a claims or transactional-based focus. But the idea can easily be expanded into a more financial institution base as well. So consider where I talk about a claim or a policy, I could also be talking about a financial user and any of the services, financial services that I may be using within the bank itself. And so here, when we talk about offering a powerful search, yes, we have a lot of content, but let's make it easy to understand what it is, where it exists, what are the properties. Give me ways to actually narrow down that information as I need to find it. Next, let's look at the quick search. We stated before, and we know that quite a large group likes to use that quick search. They grew up with it. But in this instance, when we have the potential for millions or billions of documents, just giving a title doesn't really help us. Show them more of the information that goes along with it. Show me where my term shows up in the document and give me some indication as to what I'm looking at before I click. Next, moving on to that contextual browse. This is the idea that different people might need to access the content in a different way. If I'm a claims adjuster and I'm working through a process, I'm better suited to look at a dashboard to just get my work done and to be able to move quickly from one stage to the next. I don't need to be browsing through a hierarchical tree as we see on the right here to be able to find that content. Now, somebody else who's more broadly suited across the whole of the company might be better suited to the hierarchical tree, and that's fine. Ultimately, what we need to do with our systems is to be able to display the information in a way that makes sense for each of the users. Next, let's look at the idea of a hidden browse. And so this goes along the idea of that ambient findability. It is very similar to contextual, but it has a slightly different approach. This is where we take the idea of relations and we really kind of make them important. We get the ease of browsing through content without really actively following a path. We easily jump from one related document to another. Here we can go back and forth from the policy information on the claim that we have. On the left-hand side, we have the claim. And on the right-hand side, we have the policy. So we can go back and forth without really going out into a hierarchical structure. In this example here, we have business rules on the back end that can be created to automatically trigger those relations. Or the user can also manually set links and relations to apply the relation to the content. We've also started working through artificial intelligence and, more importantly, machine learning as a next step for capturing those relations. It really comes down to the content model and the design of your content. Next, we want to give our users the idea of a single source of truth. In this example, we have a claim for an auto accident that came through. The policyholder uploaded images of the accident, and within that photo, we captured information to the coordinates, the time, etc. The system on the back end was able to read that embedded information and then apply it to the claim itself. With that, we're able to parse the information and then send it on to another system to actually really build out on what the user has already given us. So with an integration, we're able to create the single source of truth and pull into the claim itself other information that was valuable. If you wanted to, you could also build on this idea and not only send it to a mapping, but also to a weather. So that as an adjuster, I have information to what occurred, what the weather was on that given day in that given location. So it really is powerful to take advantage of integration to create a single source of truth for your users. And now any of this information becomes available for finding because it is indexed and we can search. Building on the idea of a single source of truth is the idea of taking a single flow and putting it within a given application. So regardless of who the user is, I shouldn't have to move from one system to another in order to, say, post my image for a claim, or as a policy adjuster, go into a different application to be able to adjust that. In this example here, we have 3 different views of the exact same data. And what matters is who I am accessing that information. Am I the policyholder? Am I the adjuster? Or am I a separate reviewer that needs to approve the whole thing? Ultimately, we want to give people the information that is necessary for them to do their jobs, and we want to give them an easy place to do that. And so through that, what we're trying to do is to shift within this ECM world and this idea of search to go from simple searching to simple browsing to simple finding. And so through that, 3 really quick top-level ideas that we try to convey within this. Ultimately, there really needs to be multiple ways for users to be able to find and to share content. Different people have different ways of doing their jobs, and we need to be able to support that. But all of those need to be powerful, and they need to be easy to use. And lastly, we know that the tools already exist to deliver these applications to our users, whether they are internal to the business or external as a consumer.